The sound of breaking glass shattered the afternoon stillness, and Delilah Turner knew without looking that blood would spill in the dusty street of Salt Lake City within seconds, unless someone did something impossible. It was July 1878, and the Utah summer had turned the main thoroughfare into a furnace of dust and heat. Delilah had been standing outside the general store, her arms laden with fabric she'd just purchased for new curtains, when she heard the crash of the saloon window exploding outward. Two men tumbled through the opening, landing hard on the wooden boardwalk amid a shower of glass shards that glittered like diamonds in the harsh sunlight. The shorter man, a grizzled prospector she recognized as Bill Henderson, scrambled to his feet first. His hand went to the pistol at his hip. The other man, a railroad worker named Tom Cassidy, rolled and came up with his own gun already drawn. Both men's faces were flushed red with rage and whiskey, and their eyes held that particular glaze that meant reason had long since departed. "You cheating snake," Henderson spat, his voice carrying down the street. Already people were scattering, diving for cover behind water troughs and into doorways. "I saw you palm those cards. You calling me a cheat?" Cassidy's gun hand trembled, not with fear but with fury. "You owe me that money fair and square." Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd seen gunfights before. Everyone in Salt Lake City had. They happened fast and left men bleeding out in the dirt while their families wept and the doctor shook his head. The town cemetery had a whole section dedicated to men who died over cards, women, or wounded pride. She should run. That's what any sensible person would do. But something in her chest tightened as she watched both men cock their pistols. Henderson had a wife and 3 children. She'd seen Mrs. Henderson just last week at church, bouncing their youngest on her hip. Cassidy was engaged to marry the schoolteacher's daughter in September. The invitations had already been printed. The fabric slipped from Delilah's arms and landed in the dust. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could catch up with what she was doing. "Stop!" The word tore from her throat, loud and clear and commanding in a way she didn't know she possessed. Both men's heads swiveled toward her. So did the heads of everyone peering from their hiding places. Delilah walked straight into the space between the 2 armed men, her blue calico dress swishing around her ankles, her dark hair coming loose from its careful pins. "Miss Turner, get out of the way," Henderson growled, but his gun hand lowered slightly. "You need to move right now, madam," Cassidy added, his voice tight with tension. Delilah turned to face Henderson first, placing herself squarely in his line of fire. "Mr. Henderson, your daughter Emma came to my schoolhouse last week with the most beautiful drawing. She'd made it for you. It was a picture of you and her, holding hands. She told me you were the best papa in the whole world." Henderson's jaw clenched. "That's got nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this." Delilah's voice softened but remained firm. She drew little hearts all around the border. She used her favorite red crayon for them. "She's 8 years old and she thinks you hung the moon and stars." "He cheated me," Henderson said, but the words came out weaker now. Delilah turned to face Cassidy, keeping herself positioned between both men. "Mr. Cassidy, I saw Margaret yesterday. She was at the dressmaker's, having her wedding dress fitted. She was so happy she was practically glowing. She told me she couldn't wait to be your wife, that you'd promised her a little house with a garden where she could grow roses." Cassidy's gun wavered. "He said things, terrible things." "I'm sure he did. Men say terrible things when they've been drinking and losing at cards." Delilah's voice remained steady, though her hands were shaking at her sides. "But terrible words don't kill people. Bullets do. And if either of you pulls that trigger, you'll be ending a lot more than one life." She looked back at Henderson. Emma will grow up without a father, either because you're dead or because you're in prison for murder. She'll wonder every day why you chose pride over her. Why a card game mattered more than tucking her in at night. Henderson's gun hand dropped another inch. His eyes were still hard, but something was cracking behind them. Delilah turned to Cassidy again. And Margaret will stand alone in that church in September, wearing a dress meant for the happiest day of her life, except there'll be no groom. Just an empty space where you should have been standing. All those roses she dreamed of planting will wither before they're ever seeded, because you decided that winning an argument was worth more than a lifetime of love. He can't just get away with it, Cassidy said, but his voice broke on the last word. Get away with what? Saying ugly things. Being drunk and stupid, Delilah spread her hands. Look around you. The whole town just watched both of you crash through a window like schoolboys fighting over a toy. Your pride is already wounded. Shooting each other won't restore it. It'll just make you either dead or a killer. Neither one of those things will let you sleep at night. The silence stretched taut as a rope. Delilah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could see the perspiration beading on Henderson's weathered face, the muscle jumping in Cassidy's jaw. You both have people waiting for you at home, she continued quietly. People who love you despite your flaws, people who need you. A card game is going to be forgotten in a month. But if you do this, if you pull those triggers, the consequences will echo for the rest of your lives and the lives of everyone who loves you. She took a breath and added, I'm not moving. So if you're determined to shoot each other, you'll have to shoot through me first. And then you'll have to explain to Emma and Margaret why you killed their schoolteacher over a poker hand. The seconds ticked by like hours. Then, slowly, Henderson's gun lowered to his side. He uncocked it with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the quiet street. This ain't over, he muttered, but there was no real heat in it anymore. Yes, it is, Delilah said firmly. It's over because you're both better men than this moment. Now go home to your families. Cassidy stared at her for another long moment, then he too lowered his weapon. He holstered it with shaking hands. You're either the bravest woman I ever met or the craziest. Maybe both, Delilah admitted, and felt her knees suddenly go weak as the terror she'd been holding at bay crashed over her. The two men backed away from each other, neither willing to turn their back first. Henderson finally climbed down from the boardwalk and headed toward his small house on the east side of town. Cassidy went in the opposite direction, his shoulders hunched. The street slowly came back to life. People emerged from their hiding places, murmuring in amazement. Someone started clapping and others joined in, but Delilah barely heard them. Her hands were trembling so hard she had to clasp them together. That's when she saw him. He'd been standing in front of the livery stable across the street, one hand resting on a hitching post, completely still during the entire confrontation. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt, and he wore a cattleman's hat pulled low over his eyes. But even from this distance, Delilah could see he was staring directly at her. As their eyes met, he straightened up slowly, as if he'd been struck by something. He took a step forward, then another, walking across the street toward her with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested nothing would turn him from his path. Delilah's breath caught. She'd been too focused on the gunfight to notice him before, but now she couldn't look away. He had a strong jaw covered with a few days' worth of stubble, and his eyes were the color of sage in sunlight. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. That was the damnedest thing I ever witnessed, he said when he reached her, his voice low and rough like gravel. Pardon my language, madam. I'm shaking, Delilah confessed, and held up her trembling hands as evidence. Without hesitation, He took both her hands in his own. His palms were calloused and warm, and the steadiness of his grip seemed to transfer some of his calm into her. "You have every right to shake. What you just did was extraordinary. Or foolish," she said, trying for a laugh that came out more like a gasp. "No, extraordinary." His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm Samuel Abbott. I work on the ranch north of town. Delilah Turner. I teach at the schoolhouse." "I know who you are," Samuel said, and something in his tone suggested he'd known for a while. "I've seen you in town before, but I never had a proper reason to introduce myself. And now you do. Now I do." His thumbs brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her heart skip. "Because I just watched you step between two armed men and talk them down with nothing but honesty and compassion, and I realized something standing there watching you." "What's that?" Delilah whispered. "That I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone like you, and I didn't even know it until this moment." Samuel's words were simple and direct, without flowery embellishment, but the sincerity in them made them more powerful than any poetry. "Would you allow me to walk you home, Miss Turner? I don't think you should be alone right now." Delilah knew she should protest, should insist she was fine, should maintain the proper distance expected between unmarried men and women. But her hands were still shaking in his, and something in her chest had opened up when he'd said those words about waiting his whole life. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like that." Samuel released one of her hands but kept hold of the other, tucking it into the crook of his arm. Someone had retrieved her dropped fabric from the dust and pressed it into her free hand. She barely noticed. All her awareness had narrowed to the solid warmth of Samuel's arm beneath her fingers, and the way he matched his longer stride to her shorter one. "How long have you been teaching here?" he asked as they walked. "2 years. I came from Denver after my parents passed. My aunt lives here and the school needed a teacher." "You like it?" "I love it. The children are wonderful, even the difficult ones." She glanced up at him. "How long have you been at the ranch?" "5 years. I came up from Texas. Got tired of the heat and the crowds, wanted something different." He paused. "I've built a small house on the property. The ranch owner, Mr. Whitmore, he's getting older and wanted someone reliable to help run things. He gave me a piece of land as part of my wages." Delilah heard what he wasn't saying, the careful mention of the house, as if he were laying out credentials. It made something flutter in her stomach. "That sounds like a good situation," she said carefully. "It is." Samuel's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Miss Turner, I know I'm being forward. My mama would probably scold me for it. But I'm 26 years old, and I've learned that life's too short and too unpredictable to dance around the truth." "What truth is that, Mr. Abbott?" "That watching you stand in that street changed something in me. I looked at you facing down those guns without flinching, speaking truth with such conviction, and I thought, that's her. That's the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I know that sounds crazy, we just met, but I've never been more certain of anything." Delilah's heart was hammering again, but this time not from fear. "That does sound crazy, I know. I should probably tell you I think you've lost your senses. You probably should." "Except I felt something too," Delilah admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "When you took my hands, when you looked at me, I felt like I'd been waiting for you too, and I didn't realize it until you were standing in front of me." Samuel's face transformed. His smile started slow, then spread until it lit up his entire expression. "Then I'm not crazy. We might both be crazy," Delilah said, but she was smiling too. "I can live with that." He started walking again, but slower now, as if reluctant to reach her destination. "Would you let me court you properly? I'd like to do this right." "I'd like that very much." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, then Samuel said, "Can I ask you something? What made you walk into that fight? Most people would have run." Delilah considered the question. "I kept thinking about Emma Henderson's drawing, and Margaret's wedding dress, and all the lives that would shatter if I didn't try. I just couldn't stand there and let it happen without doing something. You could have been killed, I know. But somehow in that moment, not trying seemed worse than the danger." She looked up at him. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Samuel's voice was rough with emotion. "You have the bravest heart I've ever encountered, Delilah Turner." The use of her first name should have been scandalous, but instead it felt right. Natural. Like they'd already moved beyond the formal boundaries that usually constrained new acquaintances. "My house is just there," Delilah said, pointing to a small white cottage with a tidy garden in front. "I board with my Aunt Martha. Will you introduce me?" "Already." Delilah felt a flutter of nervousness. "I told you, I want to do this properly. That means meeting your family and being clear about my intentions." Samuel's jaw set in a determined line. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." "No, I'd like you to meet her." Delilah took a breath. "But I should warn you, Aunt Martha is very protective." "Good. You deserve people who look out for you." They climbed the 3 steps to the porch, and Delilah opened the front door. The interior was cool and dim after the bright street, smelling of fresh bread and lavender. "Aunt Martha," she called out. A small, sturdy woman with silver hair in a neat bun emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at Delilah's disheveled appearance and Samuel's presence, and her eyes sharpened. What happened? There was almost a gunfight in the street. Mr. Henderson and Mr. Cassidy. I stopped it. Delilah set down her fabric bundle. "This is Mr. Samuel Abbott. He walked me home." "Samuel, this is my aunt, Martha Turner." Martha's gaze swept over Samuel with the efficiency of someone used to taking measure of people quickly. "I heard the commotion, heard shouting. You stepped between them." "Yes, madam. Lord have mercy." Martha sank into a chair. "Delilah Ann Turner, you could have been killed." "But I wasn't, and neither were Mr. Henderson or Mr. Cassidy." "That's because your niece is remarkably brave," Samuel interjected. "I've never seen anything like it, Mrs. Turner." She spoke to them with such conviction, such understanding of what they'd lose, that they couldn't help but listen. Martha's sharp eyes fixed on Samuel. "And what's your interest in this, Mr. Abbott?" "Aunt Martha," Delilah protested, feeling heat flood her cheeks. But Samuel met Martha's gaze steadily. "My interest is in your niece, madam. I'd like your permission to court her." The bluntness of it hung in the air. Martha blinked, clearly taken aback. "You just met her." "Yes, madam, but sometimes you know and I know." Samuel's voice was respectful but firm. "I work on the Whitmore Ranch. I have my own house and steady wages. I don't drink to excess, don't gamble, and I attend church most Sundays when work allows. I can provide references if you'd like." "He's very thorough," Delilah murmured, torn between mortification and delight. Martha looked between them, and slowly her stern expression softened into something almost amused. "Well, at least you're honest, and you brought her home safely, which speaks well of you." She stood up. "I suppose you may court her, Mr. Abbott, under proper supervision, of course." "Of course," Samuel agreed immediately. "I wouldn't have it any other way." "Good. Now, have you eaten? I have stew on the stove, and there's plenty." The invitation surprised them both. Samuel glanced at Delilah, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be honored, madam. Thank you." Dinner was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Martha peppered Samuel with questions about his background, his family, his prospects. He answered everything honestly and directly. He'd grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had died in a fever when he was 19, and he'd drifted north looking for a fresh start. He'd found it at the Whitmore Ranch, where he'd worked his way up from ranch hand to foreman over 5 years through hard work and reliability. "Mr. Whitmore's getting on in years," Samuel explained, sopping up stew with a piece of bread. "He's got no children of his own. He's more or less said that if I stay on and keep things running smoothly, he'll leave me a significant stake in the ranch when he passes." "That's quite an opportunity," Martha observed. "It is. I'm grateful for it. But more than that, I'm grateful for the stability. I spent too many years drifting. I like having roots now." Delilah watched him as he spoke, noting the way his hands moved when he talked about the ranch, the passion in his voice when he described the cattle and the land. This was a man who'd found his place in the world and was building something real. After dinner, Samuel took his leave with a promise to return the next evening to take Delilah for a proper walk. Martha watched from the doorway as he settled his hat back on his head and descended the porch steps. "He's smitten with you," Martha said once he was out of earshot. "I know," Delilah replied softly. "Are you smitten with him?" Delilah turned to look at her aunt. "I think I might be. Is that foolish? We only just met. Love doesn't always follow a sensible timeline." Martha's expression was distant, remembering. "I knew I'd marry your uncle the day we met. I was 17, he was 19. We had 40 good years together before he passed. Sometimes your heart just knows." That's what Samuel said, that he just knew. "Then maybe you should listen to what your heart is telling you." Martha patted her shoulder. "Just be careful, dear. I couldn't bear to see you hurt." "I will be." But as Delilah prepared for bed that night, she knew it was too late for careful. She was already tumbling headlong into feelings that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The next evening, Samuel arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He offered Delilah his arm, and they set off for a walk along the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. "I couldn't stop thinking about you last night," Samuel admitted as they walked. "I kept replaying what happened in my mind, kept seeing you step into that street." "I couldn't stop thinking about you either," Delilah confessed. "About what you said, about waiting your whole life." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I meant it, Delilah. Every word. I know this is moving fast, but I'm not a young man anymore. I've sown my wild oats and done my wandering. I know what I want now." "What do you want, you?" "A life with you, a home with you, children with you if the Lord blesses us with them." His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build something lasting and true." Delilah's breath caught. "Samuel, we barely know each other." "Then let's fix that. Ask me anything. I'll tell you everything." So they talked as the sun sank lower and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Delilah learned that Samuel loved to read but had little time for it anymore. His favorite book was Ivanhoe, and he'd read it 3 times. He was good with horses, had a natural way with them that bordered on uncanny. He had a scar on his left shoulder from being thrown by a green-broke stallion when he was 22. He loved coffee strong and black, couldn't stand the taste of oysters, and thought the prettiest sound in the world was rain on a roof. In turn, Samuel learned that Delilah had always wanted to be a teacher, even as a small child. She loved poetry, especially Wordsworth. She was terrified of spiders but refused to kill them, insisting on catching them and releasing them outside instead. She could play the piano reasonably well and sing rather poorly, though that didn't stop her from doing both when the mood struck. She dreamed of someday having a proper library in her home with floor-to-ceiling shelves. "I'll build you one," Samuel said immediately. "When we have our house, I'll build you the biggest library you want. You're very confident we'll have a house together." "I am." His smile was gentle but sure. Because I think you feel this too, Delilah, this certainty, this rightness. I do, she admitted. It's terrifying. It is, he agreed. But the best things usually are. They walked until the stars began to appear, and Samuel escorted her home with a promise to see her again the next evening. The courtship that followed was unconventional by the standards of the day, moving at a pace that made the town gossips whisper behind their fans. Samuel came to call every evening without fail. They walked and talked until they'd shared their entire life stories, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. 2 weeks after they met, Samuel kissed her for the first time. They'd been walking by the small creek that ran east of town. The evening was warm and fireflies were beginning to emerge, their lights blinking like earthbound stars. Samuel had been quiet for several minutes, just holding her hand, and Delilah had been content with the silence. "Delilah," he said finally, stopping beneath a cottonwood tree. "I need to kiss you. I've been dreaming about it for 2 weeks and it's about to drive me out of my mind." The bluntness made her laugh. "That's quite a declaration, Mr. Abbott. I'm serious." His eyes were dark in the fading light, intense. "But I won't do it unless you want me to." Instead of answering, Delilah rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss started gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. But then Samuel's arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Delilah's hands slid up to his shoulders, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget where she was, who she was. Everything except the feeling of his mouth on hers and the thundering of her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." "What, marry me, Delilah? I know it's only been 2 weeks, but I know my own mind. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Marry me." Delilah's mind spun. It was too fast, too sudden, too impulsive. Every rational thought she possessed told her to slow down, to wait, to be sensible. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'll marry you." Samuel pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching. "You mean it?" "I mean it. I love you too, Samuel. I think I have since the moment you took my hands and told me I had every right to shake." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He swept her up and spun her around, making her laugh and clutch at his shoulders. When he set her down, he kissed her again, softer this time, reverently. "I don't have a ring yet," he said against her lips, "but I'll get you one, the prettiest one in Salt Lake City. I don't need a ring, I just need you. You'll have both. You'll have everything I can give you, Delilah. I swear it." They told Martha that night. The older woman looked at them standing hand in hand in her parlor, saw the joy radiating from both their faces, and sighed. "I suppose there's no point in trying to convince you to wait," she said. "No, madam," Samuel replied. "Though we'll wait if you insist. I want your blessing." Martha studied him for a long moment. "You'll be good to her. You'll cherish her the way she deserves, every day of my life. I promise you that. Then you have my blessing." Martha smiled, and her eyes were suspiciously bright. "When's the wedding?" "Is a month too soon?" Delilah asked. "Given the way you two look at each other, I'm surprised you're willing to wait that long." They were married on a bright August morning in the small church where Delilah had attended services since arriving in Salt Lake City. The wedding was simple but heartfelt. Delilah wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. Samuel wore his Sunday best and couldn't stop smiling. The Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony. Emma Henderson was the flower girl, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Margaret Cassidy attended as a guest, her wedding to Tom having taken place the week before. Both men whose lives had nearly ended in that dusty street were present, shaking Samuel's hand and thanking Delilah again for her intervention. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Delilah with such tender passion that several of the older ladies fanned themselves, and the younger ones sighed enviously. The reception was held at the church hall, with food contributed by half the town. People came up to congratulate them throughout the afternoon, but Delilah barely registered any of it. She was too aware of Samuel's hand in hers, the gold ring on her finger, the new name she now carried. Delilah Abbott. It felt right, like putting on a coat that had been tailored specifically for her. As evening approached, Samuel borrowed a wagon from the ranch, and they drove out to the house he'd built on the Whitmore property. Delilah had seen it before during their courtship, but seeing it now as her home made it different. It was small but sturdy, with 2 rooms downstairs and a sleeping loft above. Samuel had added touches clearly meant for her. Shelves already built into one wall for her future library, a wide window that let in morning light, a small desk where she could work on lesson plans. "You like it?" Samuel asked, sounding suddenly uncertain as he helped her down from the wagon. "I love it," Delilah said honestly. "It's perfect. It's not much yet, but we'll add on, make it bigger as we need to." "As we need to," Delilah smiled at him. "Are you planning on us needing more space, Mr. Abbott?" "I'm hoping we will, Mrs. Abbott." Samuel swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise. "But first, I need to carry my bride over the threshold properly." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the center of the main room. The interior was neat and clean, smelling of fresh wood and the wildflowers someone had arranged in a jar on the table. A fire was already laid in the hearth, waiting to be lit. Samuel closed the door behind them, and suddenly they were alone together for the first time as husband and wife. The air seemed to thicken with awareness. Delilah's heart began to race as Samuel crossed the space between them. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, cupping her face in his hands. "A little," she admitted. "So am I." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "But I love you, Delilah. And I'll be gentle, I promise." "I love you too," she whispered. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Delilah felt herself melting into him. His hands were patient and tender as he helped her out of her wedding dress, his touch reverent. When they finally came together in the bed he'd built with his own hands, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to Delilah's eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds through the open window. Samuel's fingers traced lazy patterns on Delilah's bare shoulder. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm the luckiest man alive, that I can't believe you're really mine." "I'm thinking the same thing." "Well, the luckiest woman part." Samuel chuckled and pressed a kiss to her hair. "Do you know what the best part of today was?" "What?" "Watching you walk down that aisle toward me, seeing your face when you said your vows, knowing that I get to keep you forever." His arms tightened around her. "I meant what I said in my vows, Delilah. I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. And I'll love you the same way." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for walking across that street. Thank you for being brave enough to step into that fight. If you hadn't, I might never have had the courage to approach you." Samuel's voice grew thoughtful. "Do you ever think about how much our lives turned on that single moment? If Henderson and Cassidy hadn't gotten into that fight, if you hadn't stopped them, we might never have met." "We would have met eventually," Delilah said with conviction. "I believe that. I think we were meant to find each other." "You really think that?" "I do, don't you?" Samuel considered this, then smiled in the darkness. "Yeah, I do. I think we were always heading toward each other." That moment in the street was just the universe finally getting us in the same place at the same time. They talked until sleep finally claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms, beginning the first night of their new life together. The months that followed were perhaps the happiest of Delilah's life. She continued teaching at the schoolhouse, though she had to ride out from the ranch each day now. Samuel had given her a gentle mare named Clover for the journey. She loved her work, loved coming home to Samuel each evening, loved the life they were building together. Samuel proved to be everything he'd promised and more. He was attentive and affectionate, always ready with a kiss when she arrived home, always interested in hearing about her day. He'd come in from working the range and sit at the kitchen table, still dusty and tired, just to listen to her talk about her students' progress or some small drama at school. In turn, Delilah learned the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to read the weather in the way Samuel studied the sky, to understand the urgency when he had to ride out at odd hours to deal with a sick calf or a broken fence. She learned to keep dinner warm when he was delayed, and he learned to let her know when he could so she wouldn't worry. They made love frequently and with growing confidence as they learned each other's bodies and preferences. Sometimes it was quick and urgent, a stolen moment when Samuel came home for lunch. Other times it was slow and exploratory, learning new ways to bring each other pleasure. By October, Delilah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another few weeks to be certain before telling Samuel. The morning she finally worked up the courage, she made his favorite breakfast: eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits with honey. Samuel came in from his early chores, kissed her soundly, and sat down at the table. "What's the occasion?" he asked, eyeing the spread. "Did I forget something important?" "No occasion. Or rather, there might be one in about 7 months. Delilah sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. It took Samuel a moment to understand. Then his fork clattered to his plate, and his eyes went wide. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm with child. If I've calculated correctly, the baby should arrive sometime in late May or early June." Samuel was up and around the table in seconds, pulling her into his arms. "Delilah, my God, Delilah." His voice was thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I've missed 2 courses now, and I've been feeling queasy in the mornings." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. There were tears in his eyes. "We're going to have a baby." "We are." Delilah felt her own tears spill over. "Are you happy?" "Happy? I'm over the moon. I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." He dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I can't wait to meet you." Delilah laughed through her tears, running her fingers through his hair. "You're going to be a wonderful father." "I'm going to try my damnedest to be." He looked up at her. "Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting more?" "I'm fine, and I plan to keep teaching as long as I can." "Are you sure that's safe?" "Thousands of women work through pregnancy, Samuel. I'll be careful, I promise, but I need to keep working. The children need me." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right, but the moment you feel unwell, you tell me. Promise?" "I promise." The pregnancy progressed normally for the most part, though Delilah found the morning sickness more difficult than she'd anticipated. Samuel was endlessly patient, holding her hair when she was ill, bringing her dry toast and weak tea, never complaining when she was too exhausted for anything but sleep. By January, her condition was obvious enough that she had to stop teaching. The school board insisted, and though Delilah chafed at the restriction, she understood. A heavily pregnant woman standing in front of a classroom was considered inappropriate. Without her teaching to occupy her, Delilah found herself restless. Samuel was gone most days, working the ranch. Martha came to visit often, bringing food and company, but the winter days were long. To keep busy, Delilah began sewing baby clothes and preparing the small nursery Samuel had created by partitioning off a corner of their bedroom. She also began reading everything she could find about childbirth and infant care. The information was often conflicting and sometimes terrifying, but she told herself that women had been having babies since the dawn of time. She could do this. Samuel was beside himself with excitement and worry. He'd added on to the house over the fall, building a second bedroom for the baby that could be used as the child grew. He'd crafted a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small flowers into the headboard. "Those are for you," he explained when Delilah traced the delicate design with her fingers. "Wildflowers, like the ones you wore in your hair at our wedding. It's beautiful," she breathed. "Our baby is so lucky to have you as a father. Our baby is lucky to have you as a mother." Samuel placed his hand over her rounded stomach, feeling the baby kick. "Strong little thing, isn't it? Takes after you. I hope it takes after you, your courage, your kind heart. I hope it has your steadiness, your strength." Samuel kissed her softly. "I love you, Delilah Abbott." "I love you too." The baby came on a warm June morning in 1879, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Delilah woke before dawn with a cramping sensation that she initially dismissed as the false pains she'd been experiencing for weeks. But these didn't fade. Instead, they grew stronger and more regular. She shook Samuel awake. "I think it's time." He was up instantly, scrambling into his clothes. "Are you sure? Is it really happening?" "I'm sure." Another pain gripped her stronger than before, and she had to breathe through it. Samuel's face went pale. "I'll ride for the doctor and Martha. Don't move." "Samuel, I'm in labor, not dying. I'll be fine for the hour or two it takes you to fetch them." But he was already gone, thundering out of the house toward the barn. Delilah heard the sound of hooves moments later as he galloped toward town. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the entire day and into the evening. Dr. Morrison and Martha stayed with her the whole time, offering encouragement and practical help. Samuel was banished to the main room but insisted on staying close. Delilah could hear him pacing. By the time the baby finally arrived, Delilah was exhausted beyond measure. But then the doctor placed a squalling, red-faced infant on her chest, and every moment of pain evaporated. "It's a boy," Dr. Morrison announced. "A healthy, strong boy." "Samuel," Delilah called out, tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son." Samuel burst into the room as if he'd been shot from a cannon. He approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Delilah's arms. When he got close enough to see the baby's face, he made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "He's perfect," Samuel whispered. "Delilah, he's absolutely perfect. Hold him." Delilah carefully transferred the baby to Samuel's arms. Samuel took his son with infinite care, cradling the tiny body against his chest. The baby's crying quieted almost immediately, as if recognizing his father's presence. Samuel stared down at him with an expression of such complete wonder and love that it made Delilah's heart ache. "Hello, little man," Samuel said softly. "I'm your papa. I've been waiting so long to meet you." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at his son's face, Samuel said, "James." "James Turner Abbott, after your father." Delilah's father had died 5 years earlier and she'd missed him terribly. The gesture made fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. He should have a connection to his grandfather, even if he never got to meet him." "James Turner Abbott." Delilah tried the name out. "Yes, it's perfect." Dr. Morrison and Martha left them alone with instructions for care and promises to check in the next day. As evening deepened into night, Samuel and Delilah lay together in bed, their son sleeping between them in the beautiful cradle. "I never knew I could feel like this," Samuel said quietly. "So full of love it almost hurts. I know exactly what you mean. Delilah reached across to lace her fingers with his. We made him, Samuel, this perfect little person. We made him together. Best thing I ever did. Samuel's eyes were still fixed on their sleeping son. Thank you, Delilah, for him, for everything. Thank you for finding me, for loving me. She squeezed his hand. For building this life with me. They fell asleep like that, hands joined, their son safe between them, a family complete. The first few months with James were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Delilah had never been so tired in her life, but she'd also never been so happy. Samuel was a devoted father, taking the baby whenever he could to give Delilah a rest. She'd wake sometimes to find him walking the floor with James at 3 in the morning, singing soft songs about cattle and stars. As James grew, his personality began to emerge. He was an easy baby for the most part, quick to smile and slow to fuss. He had Samuel's green eyes and Delilah's dark hair, and Samuel declared him the most handsome child ever born. When James was 6 months old, Delilah began teaching again, this time holding classes at the house 3 days a week for the younger children. It wasn't ideal, but it allowed her to keep working while still caring for her son. Samuel built desks and benches for her makeshift classroom, and Martha came to help watch James during lessons. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel's position at the ranch grew more secure as Mr. Whitmore came to rely on him more and more. The old rancher had no family, and he made no secret of his intention to leave the ranch to Samuel when he passed. "You've been like a son to me," Whitmore told Samuel one day. "Better than a son. You've taken this place and made it thrive. It should be yours." Samuel was humbled by the gesture. When he told Delilah, she saw the shine of tears in his eyes. "You've earned it," she told him. "You've worked so hard for so many years. You deserve this." "We deserve it," Samuel corrected. "Everything I have is ours, Delilah, yours and mine and James's." Mr. Whitmore passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1881 when James was nearly 2 years old. True to his word, he left the ranch to Samuel, along with the cattle, the horses, and all the land. It was a staggering inheritance, one that changed their lives overnight. Samuel was no longer just a ranch hand or even a foreman. He was a rancher, a landowner, a man of property and means. "I can't believe it's ours," Delilah said, standing on the porch of the main ranch house looking out over the land. Whitmore's house was much larger than their small cabin, with multiple bedrooms and a proper parlor. "Believe it." Samuel wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "And we're going to make it something special. We're going to build a legacy for James. For any other children we're blessed with." "Other children," Delilah turned in his arms. "Are you hoping for more, if you're willing? I loved being one of 4 brothers. I'd like James to have siblings." Samuel's hand moved to her waist. "But only if you want that too. You're the one who has to carry them and birth them." "I want more," Delilah admitted. "James is wonderful, but I'd love to give him brothers and sisters." "Then we'll try for that." Samuel kissed her softly. "But first, let's move into this house and figure out how to run this ranch properly." The move was both exciting and daunting. The ranch house needed work, having been maintained by a bachelor for decades. Delilah threw herself into making it a proper home. She painted and cleaned and sewed curtains. Samuel made repairs and improvements, fixing loose boards and replacing old fixtures. By summer, the house was transformed. Delilah had even created the library she'd always dreamed of, lining one entire wall of the parlor with shelves and slowly filling them with books ordered from Denver and San Francisco. Running the ranch proved to be both harder and more rewarding than Samuel had anticipated. He hired several ranch hands to help with the work, good men who respected him and followed his direction. The cattle herd grew under his careful management, and the horses he raised developed a reputation for quality and sound temperament. Delilah continued teaching, now holding classes in one of the unused rooms in the ranch house. More students came now that she had proper space, and she found herself teaching children of all ages, from beginning readers to teenagers preparing for high school. In the fall of 1881, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. James was thrilled when they explained that he was going to be a big brother, though at 2.5, he didn't quite understand what that meant. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived in early May of 1882. He was bigger than James had been, with a lusty cry and Samuel's stubborn chin. James was fascinated by his new brother, always wanting to help feed him or rock him. Gentle, Delilah reminded him constantly. Be gentle with baby Daniel. Life with 2 children was chaotic but joyful. The house was always full of noise and activity. Samuel would come in from working the ranch to find toys scattered across the floor and both boys needing his attention. He loved every moment of it. 2 years later, in 1884, they had a daughter. Emma came quickly, arriving in the middle of a thunderstorm with Martha barely making it in time to assist. She had Delilah's dark hair and eyes, and Samuel was utterly besotted from the first moment he held her. "I have a daughter," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We have a daughter, Delilah. We do." Delilah watched him cuddle the baby with a smile. "You're going to be impossibly overprotective, aren't you?" "Absolutely. No boys are getting anywhere near her until she's 30. "Samuel, be reasonable. 40 then, maybe 50. Delilah laughed, which turned into a wince. "Don't make me laugh. Everything still hurts." Samuel immediately turned serious, carefully placing Emma in her cradle before returning to sit beside Delilah on the bed. "Are you all right?" "Should I fetch the doctor?" "I'm fine, just sore. This was number 3, remember, I know what to expect." She took his hand. "Stop worrying. I can't help it. You're my whole world, Delilah, you and these babies. And you're mine." She squeezed his fingers. "Thank you for being such a wonderful husband and father, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for saying yes when I proposed after knowing me for 2 weeks. Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on me. Best decision I ever made." Delilah pulled him down for a kiss. "Well, second best. First best was stepping into that street. Lucky for both of us you did." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, listening to the sounds of their sons playing in the next room with Martha supervising. Outside, rain pattered against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. "You ever think about that day?" Samuel asked. "About how different things would be if you hadn't stopped that fight?" "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on what-ifs. We're here now, and that's what matters." "You saved more than Henderson and Cassidy that day, you know. You saved me too." Delilah looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I was drifting before I met you. Oh, I had work and a house, but no real purpose beyond getting through each day. You gave me something to live for. Someone to build a future with." Samuel's eyes were serious. "You changed everything for me, Delilah. You made me want to be better, to do more, to create something lasting. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Teaching, living with Martha, existing but not really thriving. You made me feel alive. You made me feel loved in a way I'd never experienced before." Samuel leaned in to kiss her again, slow and tender. "I love you so much, more now than even the day we married, if that's possible." "It's possible, because I feel the same way. I love you more with every passing day." The years continued to pass, marked by small moments of joy and occasional challenges. The ranch prospered under Samuel's management. He became known throughout Utah as a fair employer and an honest dealer. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he was often asked to mediate disputes. Delilah's reputation also grew. Her students consistently performed well, and parents clamored to enroll their children in her classes. She became an informal community leader, organizing charity drives and social events, always ready to help a neighbor in need. Their children thrived. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working alongside his father. Daniel was more rambunctious, always getting into mischief, but with such charm that he rarely faced consequences. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions and demanding to learn everything her brothers knew. In 1887, when Emma was 3, Delilah gave birth to another son, Thomas. He was their easiest baby, sleeping through the night almost from birth and rarely crying. Samuel joked that Thomas knew he was the 4th child and had decided not to add to the chaos. Their family felt complete now, 4 healthy children and a ranch that provided well for them all. Samuel had hired enough hands that he could spend more time with his family. Delilah had trained 2 assistants to help with teaching, allowing her to take on a more supervisory role and spend more time with the younger children. One evening in the summer of 1890, after the children were all in bed, Samuel and Delilah sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Samuel had his arm around her shoulders, and she was leaning into his warmth. "You remember that first evening we walked together?" Delilah asked. "When you told me you'd been waiting your whole life to meet me, of course, I meant every word. Did you ever imagine it would be like this, all of this?" She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, the house full of sleeping children behind them. "I imagined it would be good. But the reality is better than anything I could have dreamed." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. 12 years married, and I still get excited when I see you coming. Still want to talk to you about everything. Still think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Even with all the gray hair and wrinkles, especially with them. They're evidence of our life together. Every gray hair is a year we've shared. Every wrinkle is a smile or a laugh or a moment of concern for our children. His fingers traced along her cheek. "You're more beautiful to me now than you were at 24. I love you," Delilah said simply. "I loved you when you took my hands in that dusty street. I loved you when you proposed by the creek. I loved you when you held James for the first time. And I love you now, sitting here watching the sunset after another ordinary, extraordinary day. I love you too, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." Samuel turned her face toward his and kissed her as the last light faded from the sky. In 1895, when James turned 16, he began talking about his future. He wanted to expand the ranch, to acquire more land and increase the herd. Samuel listened carefully to his son's plans, impressed by the thought and research James had put into them. "You've got a good head for this," Samuel told him. "I'm proud of you, son." "I learned from the best." James's expression was earnest. "You built something incredible here, Pa. I want to make it even better. Make it something we can pass down to my children and their children. Then we'll do it together, partners." James's face lit up. "Really? You mean it?" "I do. You're old enough and smart enough to take on real responsibility. And frankly, I'd like to spend more time with your mother and the younger children while they're still young. If you can handle more of the ranch work, that gives me that freedom." They shook hands formally, sealing the agreement. Over the next few years, James proved himself more than capable. He had Samuel's work ethic and Delilah's keen mind, a formidable combination. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Daniel, at 13, showed no interest in ranching. Instead, he spent all his free time with the horses, working with the difficult ones that no one else could handle. He had a gift for it, an almost supernatural ability to understand what the horses needed. Samuel recognized that Daniel would likely make his living as a horse trainer rather than a rancher, and he supported that path. Emma, at 11, declared that she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. She was already helping with the younger students, and she had Delilah's gift for making learning engaging and fun. Delilah felt a swell of pride every time she watched her daughter work with the children. Thomas, at 8, was still figuring out what he loved. He liked a bit of everything, helping James with the cattle, working with Daniel and the horses, sitting in on Delilah's classes. Samuel said he was keeping his options open, which was wise at his age. In the spring of 1898, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Delilah with a trip. He'd arranged for Martha and James to watch the younger children, and he took Delilah to Denver for a week. It was the first time they'd been truly alone together since James was born, and it felt almost scandalous. They stayed in a proper hotel, ate in restaurants, attended the theater, and spent long hours just walking and talking, rediscovering each other without the constant demands of children and ranch. "I'd forgotten what it was like to have a conversation without being interrupted," Delilah admitted as they strolled through a park. "I'd forgotten what it was like to sleep past dawn," Samuel countered with a grin. They were both joking. Neither would trade their life for anything, but the week felt like a gift. They returned home refreshed and reconnected, ready to dive back into the beautiful chaos of their full house. As the new century approached, Samuel and Delilah found themselves reflecting on all they'd built. Their children were growing into capable, kind young adults. The ranch was more successful than Samuel had ever dreamed. Delilah's school had expanded to the point where she'd built a dedicated schoolhouse on their property, and students came from miles around to attend. On New Year's Eve, 1899, as the family gathered to welcome the new century, Samuel pulled Delilah aside. "21 years ago, I watched you step into a gunfight with nothing but your courage and your words. I fell in love with you in that moment, and I've fallen deeper in love with you every day since." "Samuel," Delilah's eyes grew misty, "you're going to make me cry in front of the children." "Let me finish." He took both her hands just like he had that first day. "You've given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You've given me children I adore, a home I'm proud of, and a love that sustains me through everything. You are the bravest, kindest, most remarkable woman I've ever known, and I thank God every day that you were brave enough to step into that street. And I thank God every day that you were standing across the street watching, that you walked over to me, that you were bold enough to tell me you'd been waiting your whole life to meet me." Delilah rose on her toes to kiss him. "I would do it all again, Samuel. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I'd choose you every single time." From the other room, they heard the children counting down the final seconds until 1900. Samuel and Delilah joined their voices to the chorus, and as the new century began, they kissed while their children cheered. The years that followed brought both joys and sorrows, as life always does. Martha passed away peacefully in 1902, surrounded by family. Delilah grieved deeply for the aunt who'd raised her, but she took comfort in knowing Martha had lived to see her great nieces and nephews grow up. James married in 1904, bringing home a sweet-natured girl named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the family. They gave Samuel and Delilah their first grandchild, a boy they named Samuel after his grandfather, in 1905. Daniel struck out on his own in 1906, starting a horse training business that quickly became renowned throughout the West. He never married, claiming he was wedded to his horses, but he remained close to the family and visited often. Emma attended teachers' college and returned to take over Delilah's school in 1908. She married a young doctor in 1910 and continued teaching right up until her first child was born in 1911. Thomas surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, moving to San Francisco to practice. But he returned home often, never losing his connection to the ranch and the family. Through it all, Samuel and Delilah remained the steady center of their growing family. They'd added on to the house multiple times to accommodate visiting children and grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive, now run primarily by James, with Samuel serving as an advisor and occasional ranch hand when he felt like working. On a warm evening in 1915, Samuel and Delilah celebrated their 37th anniversary. Their children had thrown them a party, and the house was full of grandchildren racing around and causing happy chaos. After everyone had gone to bed, Samuel and Delilah sat on the porch, in the same spot where they'd sat so many times before. Delilah's hair was now completely silver, and Samuel's face was deeply lined from years in the sun. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who'd fallen in love at first sight in a dusty street. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Samuel asked, his arm around Delilah's shoulders in a gesture that had become second nature over the decades. "What's that?" "Henderson and Cassidy. I wonder whatever happened to them. They both moved away years ago, didn't they, after their children were grown? Henderson went to California, I think. Cassidy took his family to Oregon." Samuel chuckled. "They never did become friends, but at least they never shot each other." "Thanks to you stepping into that street," Samuel said, and his voice was as full of admiration as it had been 37 years earlier. "Well, I'm certainly glad I did. Otherwise I might never have met the most stubborn, loving, wonderful man in the world. And I might never have met the bravest woman in the world." Samuel kissed her temple. "Best day of my life, watching you face down those guns. Second best was when you said yes to marrying me. What about when our children were born? Those were the best days too, all of them." "Every day with you has been the best day, Delilah." She laughed and snuggled closer to him. "You're getting sentimental in your old age. I've always been sentimental about you. I'm just less shy about showing it now." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets. Inside, they could hear one of the grandchildren crying and then being soothed. The sounds of their legacy, their love made manifest in children and grandchildren, and a life built from nothing but determination and devotion. "You have any regrets?" Delilah asked softly. "Not a single one. You?" "No, not one." She turned to look at him. "I'd do it all again, exactly the same way. Every choice, every challenge, every moment led me here to you, to this life. I wouldn't change any of it. Neither would I." Samuel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture as familiar as breathing. "You're still my favorite person to talk to, my favorite person to sit with in silence, my favorite person in the world. And you're mine, today, tomorrow, and always." The years continued their inevitable march forward. Samuel and Delilah grew older, more gray, more weathered. But their love remained as strong and vital as it had been on that dusty street in 1878. They'd built a remarkable life together, a family that would carry on for generations, a legacy of courage and commitment and deep, abiding love. In 1920, on a peaceful autumn morning, Samuel woke early as he always did. He turned to look at Delilah, still sleeping beside him after 42 years of marriage, and felt the same surge of love and gratitude he'd felt every morning since they wed. He thought about the girl who'd stepped fearlessly into a gunfight, who'd chosen to risk her own life to save two foolish men she barely knew. He thought about the woman who'd agreed to marry him after knowing him for 2 weeks. He thought about the mother who'd given him 4 incredible children and the grandmother who delighted in their grandchildren. But mostly, he thought about Delilah herself, the woman who'd been his partner, his lover, his best friend, his everything for more than 4 decades. The woman who still made his heart race when she smiled. The woman whose hand he still sought out in crowds. The woman he loved more with each passing year, impossible as that seemed. Delilah stirred and opened her eyes, immediately finding his. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning, beautiful," Samuel replied, just as he had every morning for 42 years. "You need glasses," she teased. "I'm old and wrinkled. You're perfect." He pulled her close. "And you're mine." "Yours," she agreed, settling against his chest with a contented sigh. "Today and always." Outside, the ranch was waking up. They could hear James calling orders to the ranch hands, the thunder of hooves as the horses were led out to pasture, the distant cry of their newest great-grandchild. Life continuing, the legacy they'd built together thriving and growing. But for this moment, Samuel and Delilah stayed in bed, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful beyond words for the beautiful, extraordinary life they'd created together. It had all started with an act of bravery in a dusty street, and it had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that had lasted a lifetime and would echo through the generations to come. Their story was one for the ages, passed down through their family with pride. How Delilah had stopped a gunfight with nothing but words. How Samuel had watched and fallen in love right there. And how that single moment of courage had blossomed into decades of devotion, building a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was a testament to the power of bravery, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love found against all odds in the wild, untamed West of 1878.